Some of them have filmed videos showing various ways of destroying Uniqlo clothing, including setting it on fire, tearing it apart, or cutting it up. They've added hashtags like support Xinjiang Cotton to their posts and declared their intent to boycott Uniqlo. People might wonder, what exactly is so special about Xinjiang Cotton? Why did the Chinese Communist Party feel compelled to repeatedly mobilize vast resources, craft narratives, and rally the public to defend it? Hello and welcome back to Oh My God. Do you guys have any favorite clothing brands? Uniqlo is pretty great, isn't it? But did you know, recently Chinese nationalists also announced the reason? The president of Uniqlo's parent company in Japan publicly stated that they do not use cotton from the Xinjiang region. Although the president declined to further explain the reasons behind his decision, once the news was reported into official media and spread back to China, Chinese netizens collectively erupted, venting their anger online in various ways. Some of them have filmed videos showing various ways of destroying Uniqlo clothing, including setting it on fire, tearing it apart, or cutting it up. They've added hashtags like support Xinjiang Cotton to their posts and declared their intent to boycott Uniqlo. Under nationalist mobilization, many foreign brands have faced boycott threats from Chinese netizens.